going to see today for the Council of International Schools School Accreditation visit will focus on primary literacy. But the interview techniques and processes, as well as a focus on student learning, the school's guiding statements, and internationalism can translate to any area of the CIS standards. So there are multiple purposes we hope to achieve today during the interview. One is to model interview techniques, the techniques of pausing, paraphrasing, synthesizing, asking questions for clarification, as well as asking questions to probe for more information. It's to model how to create a warm, inviting, and safe interview atmosphere or environment. It's to obtain information from a teacher on student learning successes, as well as how the school's guiding statements are being embedded throughout the school program, and also how internationalism is being addressed. It's to evaluate the school self-study and the evidence behind it. It's also to explore and possibly deselect some recommendations and commendations, as well as exploring recommendations to give the school team to consider so the school can move ahead. Thank you, Marcello, for agreeing to do this interview. I know your time is really limited, so I'll make the most of it today. So before we begin, there are a couple purposes today. One is to find out from you where you think student learning is successful and areas where you think students could improve in their learning. And another reason is to look at your school's self-study evaluation and think about the evidence behind it and kind of verifying what we read in your school self-study. So we'll be looking at areas of learning with your students that are going really well, and maybe some areas where we can think about making recommendations to make your school even better. So in light of all of this, please know how much I appreciate your expertise and the information you give us, but also that the source is confidential.
Great.
So, any questions?
Nope.
Okay, you're okay with all that?
Yeah,
all
I'm ready. Let's get started.
Good. All right. So let's, for a minute, would you remind me of your responsibilities at the school and your position, Marcello?
I am a second grade teacher, classroom teacher, and I work on a team of 3 teachers on the second grade. And so I have 18 to 22, maybe 25 kids. Okay. And I have an assistant who works with me.
Okay, that's a very nice,
it's nice
position to have in your classroom. So how long have you been at your school?
This is my, I finished 3 years.
Okay, and have you been in grade 2?
Yes, for all 3 years.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Good. So since our focus is on literacy or English language arts, I'm not sure what you called it at your school. How do you refer to?
Literacy. Well, both.
Literacy,
yeah.
Okay. I'd love to talk about how you define it or how you clarify it in your school. What does it encompass in your classroom when we talk about literacy?
Everyone is a literacy teacher, from PE, math, science. Especially because we're an international community, we have a lot of children who English is their second language to different degrees. Sure. So yeah, a PE teacher is helping them understand and develop language. But more specifically, when I plan and work with colleagues about literacy, it's the reading aspect and the writing aspect. So yeah, focus on developing their communication skills, written and oral. If you kind of break it down into smaller micro units, do you have a word study or? Yes, yes. So we're in the reading, we do guided reading. We have different kinds of reading workshop setups. We've used different programs to focus on different aspects, book groups, individual reading. We do a lot of conferencing with the kids. And then in writing, we work with the Teachers College Reading and Writing workshop model. And you're lucky enough to have an instructional assistant. Is that how you refer to the person in your classroom? Yes. Well, because my classroom is the English language learners. Oh, I see. So I get that support. More specifically for the students in my class who are emergent English speakers. So thinking about what your school stands for, some people call it guiding statements, vision, mission. Thinking about what your school stands for, how does that manifest itself in your classroom or throughout the school? What I see as the most important part of our mission is just preparing the kids to be global citizens, to be responsible citizens, to be empathetic, to be members of a community. So second grade is, I think, a grade where it's still a very important part of what happens. We spend a lot of time, especially in the first part of the year, working on that, and for the children to understand they can learn from each other and they can help each other. We also are trying to prepare the kids to be communicators and to understand their own learning, to be metacognitive and understand how they learn and how learning can help them, which helps them, become better citizens, but also helps them become more fulfilled.
A visiting committee noted in your self-study that you use Readers and Writers Workshop, and you had mentioned it a little bit before. And what difference does that make with learning in your children? If you could maybe give some examples, that'd be great, Marcella.
Well, my only experience as a teacher in 10 years, I came from New York City, where we were a teachers college focus school. So I've only ever used it. But essentially it gives reading and writing for a reason, and immediately starts instilling in the students that they are readers and that they are writers, and they publish their writing, and so it's very intrinsic as far as the motivation goes.
Sure.
It also fosters a level of independence in the students as far as being independent readers and independent writers, which then gives the teacher the opportunity to conference and work with them individually, which is also, actually, going back to the mission, another really important part of our mission is being able to offer each student exactly what they need. And that's not easy. So if you have 18 kids, you have to have, sometimes 17 of them have to be independent, whilst I address whatever one child is working with. Usually you can hopefully get 4 or 5 of them together, but that doesn't always happen.
So let's make sure I understand this correctly. The strengths you feel in this program are the students are motivated,
Yes,
they're developing independence,
absolutely.
and you're able to differentiate instruction for students because of that independence.
Yeah, and I think gather very meaningful understanding of where each student is.
Sure.
And what they need.
Would you mind sharing how you're measuring literacy in your students, and what are you seeing?
We perform a DRA, which is a very in-depth reading assessment in October and in May. So it involves a running record, and then a sort of comprehension, a very deep comprehension piece, or a comprehension piece that goes very deep. So it begins with retelling the story, but then it goes into why do you think the author did this? Why do you think the author did that? And you really get an understanding of all the different aspects of how a child reads. And we do that twice a year. And then during the year, once or twice in between October and May, we run a Fontes and Pinnell running record to get it's not as in-depth. And then we also have the opportunity to do this conferencing and get anecdotal records and watch them. And so that's been amazing. I think you get a very, very clear picture of where kids are, how they're progressing, where they're going, what they need. Writing, we have it's less quantifiable. We have less specific. It's more a lot of conferences. We have a lot of published pieces that we can look at. But then a published piece receives a lot of support along the way.
Sure.
So we have all their drafts. When kids publish, I always have them publish their published final piece with all their drafts and all their spelling sheets and everything together, so I can look at those. And those all go into our reporting system.
Yeah, you're feeling pretty confident about the reading, especially.
Especially the reading, and I think also it's a contrast to my last school, where we didn't really have much in place. So it's an amazing amount of data to use.
So what I understand about writing is that you're able to look at the writing process and see where they've come from draft to final copy. And tell me if I'm incorrect in this. I don't feel that you have quantifiable measures as much with writing. Is that a correct assessment?
I'd say so.
Is this something that runs through the grades with writing? Do you feel it's just grade 2 that doesn't have a quantifiable measure for writing?
I'm not certain, because our literacy focus is to articulate vertically both what we're teaching and how we're teaching it. And that's a big job. Good. And so that's something that we see
Okay.
in that process,
Okay.
you know.
Yeah, it might be a good next step for the
Yeah.
school. Good, thank you. So thinking about areas of underachievement, it sounds like your students are quite motivated and excited about literacy, but if you could pick an area where you're not as happy with their growth, what would that be?
One thing that I find tough is the English language learners piece. We have our kids come in as, you know, they can be emergent. Emergent are the kids that have no English at all when they come into the classroom, and they have the assistant who works with them. But if I have, say, 4 of those in a class of 18, they really need a lot of support. Part of their day is spent in the ELL setting, which is a fantastic place. It's very rich, and there's a lot of there's a high ratio of teachers to students, and it's sort of their clubhouse, you know, and so they really get to express themselves, and they lose all their inhibitions in there. And I've walked past the room, and I can't believe what kids who then come to my room are much more intimidated, and so I'd like to somehow find a way to bridge that gap, and I'm not exactly sure what it is. As far as I mean, I hate using the word weakness because we're working so hard on it, but it is vertical articulation. I think we find, for instance, like a mentor text in 2nd grade that we use to teach writing, and then we find out that kindergarten have all the Kevin Henkes books because they're using it as a mentor text.
Yeah, that's frustrating.
Yeah, and you know, even we'll go through our teachers' college units of study, and we'll find that they suggest the same mentor texts at different grades. And so, of course, everyone's... So we need to smooth all that sort of thing out through collaborating vertically. And we're working hard right now getting our 2nd grade units all documented and all really in place. And you tend to kind of blinker yourself when you do that because it's a lot of work. And so next, we can take a step back and have a look at what they're doing above us and below us. And that's a big piece.
Sure. Along with your mentor text, do you feel you have an adequate supply of texts in your school?
Yes, absolutely.
That's good.
I'm always amazed teaching internationally, like getting a book seems like, how are we going to get books?
So now we're going to shift a little bit and think about the overall picture at your school regarding the school successes in kind of the primary unit, since that's where you are. Your wife's the primary teacher as well, so you might have some insight in this.
My daughter's in primary.
Oh, there you go. Lots of connections. So thinking about the K-1-2, or however you divide the primary unit at your school, what are some successes that you feel really good about, and what are some challenges you see ahead?
I'll start with challenges just because is continuity. I think in an international school, it's always going to be it's always going to be a challenge because people come and people go, and they bring their great ideas, and but they also philosophically, you know, they'll have been interviewed. Philosophically, they're in the same ballpark as the school, but they're not specifically in the same area. So it takes time to bring people up to speed. You know, sometimes you might, in a team of 3, you might have 2 new people, and so the one person's training 2 people. They're working hard to come up to. That's always a challenge. The whole elementary school is it's a very close-knit little community, and we work well together in our elementary meetings, and you know, credit goes to our principal who works very hard to have that happen. Communication is pretty good. Like I said before, sometimes, you know, that's our field trip. You took our field trip. You know, things happen. So I guess that could get better. And that vertical articulation piece, is something I think that's top of our list.
Good. Yeah, that came through in a few places.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. So we're going to think again about your position as a classroom teacher at your school, and what positive difference does your position make to the staff, the parents, and the school?
We have a wonderful technology coordinator, integrator at elementary, but I've certainly taken on, for my own interest, how can technology change education in the primary. So I've done a lot of work with that over the last 2-3 years, but I've spent a lot of time helping other teachers, my team primarily, but also I've run a lot of workshops for the other teachers to help them kind of get a global aspect to their classroom, communicate with classrooms. Now we're all part of different committees that are reviewing different parts of the curriculum. So I've been on the science committee for the last couple of years. And we put a lot of energy into that, you know, it's meetings after school, but it's interesting and people work hard to run the meetings. And so, you know, we all work hard to try and make them fruitful. Difficult, but a difficult situation. Well, I think there's a certain amount of communication that just has to happen as a teacher. I've done it ever since I was a teacher. I've never really questioned it, you know. They know what's happening in the classroom, what piece of curriculum we're working on. I keep a classroom blog. That's one of the things I've managed to help institute is all the classroom teachers have a blog that they post things on. So that helps communication a lot. The kids can post their work there. But I've always had a good relationship with parents. They tend to all be my age, have similar interests. You know, it's just where I am. Yeah, and we have a very supportive elementary administration and counselor who are wonderful at take a lot of the weight off as far as difficult situations with parents, or not necessarily the parent being difficult, but a difficult situation. They take the central role, and that's very helpful. And then with the students, you know, I have a very fun relationship with the students.
I'm not surprised.
It tends to fun. So you know, if in doubt, I'll go for the fun thing rather than the bone dry thing. But yeah, I'm popular at least.
Always fall back on your popularity.
Right.
So one thing that I heard that came through in that little conversation was your passion for technology and your contribution to the school with technology. It seems that your blogging and having classrooms connect with other classrooms around the world also supports your school's global citizenship focus, right? That sounds like it's quite coherent with the school's vision.
Yeah.
Also, it sounds like you have great support in your school from your counselors, your librarian, your principal, the other teachers.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's a very supportive environment, and I, you know, we've all been in environments that aren't as supportive, and I really appreciate it. I appreciate it, and I'm very conscious of it. My wife and I always talk about it.
Can you share with me overall how you evaluate your effectiveness as a teacher, and what do you do with that information?
Well, I do that in my head all the time. I'm comparing what I'm doing now to what I've done in the past, and seeing how the kids respond, and changing it. On a more formal level, we have an evaluation process that we go through with our principal. You know, it's like a little self-study. Our first 2 years, in your first 2 years in the school, you go through a personalized growth plan that you put together with the principal, and sort of evaluate yourself at the beginning, at the end of each year. And then at the end of the second year, hopefully you've fulfilled all your goals, and you're ready to move on to choosing a SMART goal. One goal, which for me this year was technology-based, to document some units and really see if it was changing the learning process, and if it was improving it, or if the kids were learning in a different way that might bring something else out. And that's more formal and really more informative for me, you know. It's more concrete. And there's all, you know, the little voices in your head telling you whether you're doing a great job or not. Yeah. So it's those two parts of it. You know, it's your personal motivation. You have to be motivated to do a good job.
So from all that internal feedback you're giving yourself and that metacognitive aspect, can you think of one thing that you changed, a practice or a strategy that you felt really improved learning for kids?
Yes, reflecting and documenting what happened in the unit afterwards, especially because I've never taught the same grade 3 years in a row. And if you have a lot of reflection that's documented, that you're able to look at when you get the unit out again, it's really helps. You know, it'll never be exactly the same because you've got a different bunch of kids, but you can begin to get yourself a better idea of where you can go with the unit. So my documentation, my organization in these 3 years has helped a lot. And I think the team, the 3-person team, has helped with that, you know, because I think I learned that from the other people in
So
there.
is this documentation or your thinking on your part shared with your team members?
Yes, we do it
Oh,
together.
I see.
So we teach the unit, and then we take an afternoon when the unit's finished. We take an afternoon to reflect on how each activity went, reflect on how useful the assessments were, and then we leave it. We always want to start making the changes then, but we've learned to leave it, and then next time we come around to it, start making the changes.
Well, we're nearing the end of our time together. Is there anything else you'd like to add that we didn't talk about?
Not really. Just that this has been interesting for me because I've thought of things I haven't thought of for a while.
Yeah.
You know,
It's been interesting for me too, because
Great.
I actually learned some things about your school I didn't know, and some very nice things actually
Great.
about what's working well at your school, and then some areas maybe that would help kids learning a little bit more. So
for sure.
very helpful.
Great.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.